in the middle of the vast ocean, where the waves roll endlessly and the deep blue sky blends with the endless horizon. Giant shark fishing trips set off as an adventure full of danger and challenge. The ships leave the dock early in the morning, before the sun has risen, carrying the hopes, determination and worries of experienced fishermen. They know that giant sharks are ferocious predators, full of strength and aggression, but the economic value they bring is also enormous, making the trip a gamble between life and death. The ships gradually move out to sea, leaving the mainland behind only a faint trace in the mist. Before them is the deep blue sea, where giant sharks often lurk in the deep waters. To catch them, fishermen prepare wrist-sized fishing lines, giant sharp hooks and tons of live bait, usually tuna, mackerel or even large pieces of meat that give off a bloody smell, which is terribly attractive to this predator. When the bait is dropped, the waiting period begins, and also the time when tension covers the entire ship. The sea is unusually quiet, only the sound of waves lapping against the ship's side and the sound of wind whistling through the mast. But everyone's heart is in turmoil, anxiously waiting for the strong jerk signaling that a giant shark has been hooked. Suddenly, a screech rang out from the tight steel wire. The ship shook violently, the entire crew rushed in, everyone pulling with all their might. The sharks struggled, swishing their tails, creating giant columns of water, white foam flying like a small storm in the middle of the ocean. The tug-of-war lasted for hours. Sweat beaded on each person's forehead, muscles tensed, hands bleeding from friction with the fishing line. At times, the giant shark dragged the entire ship for miles, as if the fishermen were just small people being dragged into a cruel fate. But with resilience, experience and solidarity, they finally gradually gained the upper hand, bit by bit pulling the giant sea monster closer to the ship's side. When its giant black shadow appeared under the blue water, everyone's heart beat rapidly, their eyes lit up with joy mixed with fear. The shark was pulled up, its body more than 10 meters long, weighing tons, still thrashing violently like a deep-sea devil. To subdue it, the fishermen had to use iron hooks, ropes and specialized tools, holding it tight while trying to bring it up to the deck. When the giant shark finally lay helpless, the entire crew breathed a sigh of relief, joy bursting out after hours of suffocating tension. That giant body was not only a trophy but also a testament to the courage, strength and perseverance of those who lived by the sea. The journey continued in the red sunset, when the sun gradually sank below the horizon, leaving behind the silhouette of the small ship carrying the great victory. Gliding in the vast ocean, where humans and the sea are always linked in the eternal battle for survival after the giant shark was subdued and brought to the deck. The work was not over yet, because the entire crew had to urgently process the spoils to preserve them in time amidst the salty heat of the ocean. Large, shiny knives were sharpened right on the ship. Each layer of the shark's thick, steel-hard skin was peeled off. The red meat, the strong fishy smell spread throughout the space. The fishermen had to work in a hurry and skillfully, because even the slightest mistake could spoil the meat, causing a heavy loss on the trip. Some others were busy preparing freezers, stacking ice into blocks, neatly arranging each part of the giant shark's meat for preservation. Rare parts such as fins, liver or shark skin were carefully kept, because they had huge commercial value on the market. Meanwhile, a few sailors were still sitting on the wooden floor, their hands shaking with exhaustion. their breathing rapid as if they had just escaped the jaws of death. Their eyes looking out to the distant sea, where countless other giant monsters were still hidden. The small ship carried the fishy smell and the spoils of war, continuing to drift on the vast waves. Preparing for a new day, possibly facing more fierce battles. At night, the ocean wore a mysterious black coat. The starry sky seemed to want to fall down and touch the sea surface. But under that dark layer of water were places where other giant shadows were moving. The fishermen took turns keeping watch at night, still holding tightly onto their fishing lines, their eyes never leaving the water, because they understood that at any moment a sudden jerk could signal the appearance of another shark, and a new battle would begin. In that rare moment of peace, they sat together, sipped water, chewed dry bread, and told each other stories passed down from generation to generation about their long journeys. About fishermen who never returned because they were swallowed by the sea. Those stories both made people's hearts tremble and ignited the fire of determination in their chests. Because the sea never easily gives away its spoils, only the strong, brave and resilient can return with glory. And so, the journey to catch giant sharks in the middle of the ocean continues. Like an endless loop of people and the sea, where life, death, fear and pride are always intertwined, creating tragic stories that only those who have drifted on the waves can fully understand. As dawn gradually broke, pale yellow light shone on the sparkling sea. Drops of salt mist gathered on the deck. The crew busily prepared for a new day. Fishing lines were carefully checked. Each giant hook was sharpened. Live bait was dropped into the deep water. Although tired after the previous day's battle, no one dared to be negligent, because they knew that opportunity only came to those who were patient and brave. The vast ocean was not gentle. Each white-capped wave seemed to want to swallow the small boat. The wind blew harshly, making the fisherman's skin dark and cracked. But all those harshness only made him closer together, because out there was the vast ocean, and on this deck, only camaraderie could help them overcome all challenges. When the sun rose high, the fishing lines shook violently once again, signaling that another giant shark had bitten the bait. This time, the monster was much stronger. It struggled, pulling the entire ship around like a leaf in the water. The steel ropes screeched as if about to break. The fishermen shouted. Their feet slipped on the deck soaked with seawater and blood. But no one gave up. The fight lasted for hours. Strength was worn out, hands numb, but everyone's eyes burned with determination. When the giant shark was finally approached, the whole crew exploded in a whirlwind of emotions. Both joyful and exhausted, it was pulled up, lying exposed on the deck, its giant body covered in blood and seawater, its fierce eyes gradually fading. No one said anything, only the sound of waves and wind served as the background for that sacred moment. Because they knew they had just conquered the sea once again. After finishing the prey, when the afternoon light fell, the sky was red as fire. The ship quietly turned the waves back to the mainland. On deck were heavy spoils. In the heart was pride and relief after days of suffocating tension. The journey to catch giant sharks was not only a story about food and clothing, but also an epic of people who dared to face danger, dared to enter the battle between life and death to affirm their strength and courage in the vast ocean. As the ship gradually approached the mainland, the silhouette of the harbor appeared faintly in the dim light of the early morning. Where the roofs, the lighthouses and long lines of relatives stood waiting, the smell of sea salt still lingered in the air, but mixed with it was the warmth of the homeland, completely different from the harsh wilderness far away at sea. The fishermen, after many days and nights of fighting the ocean, now had faces filled with pride mixed with exhaustion. The ship laden with spoils of war docked. Each giant shark was brought down to the harbor, leaving onlookers amazed by the terrifying size and ferocity still imprinted on their bodies. Children cheered, the elderly clasped their hands in prayer. And traders quickly gathered to negotiate. Because shark meat, skin, fins and organs all brought huge economic value, the atmosphere at the harbor became bustling, with laughter mixed with the cries of buying and selling, the creaking sound of wood from heavy crates being loaded onto trucks. The fishermen received the fruits of their hard journey. The wages were divided equally. Everyone smiled even though their hands were still full of calluses and wounds from fishing lines. After everything was settled, they returned to their small house by the sea, where there was yellow light and the waiting arms of their families. Simple but cozy meals became priceless rewards, dispelling the stormy days. But in the heart of every fisherman, the desire for further trips, for the next conquests, still burns, because the ocean never stops challenging, nor stops giving opportunities to those who dare to venture. And so, when the wounds gradually heal, when the nostalgia for the distant sea rises in the eyes, the ships will once again set sail, extending the endless journey of humans in the conquest of giant sharks in the vast ocean a few months after returning from their glorious voyage. Stories of the giant sharks the crew had caught had spread along the coast, becoming the talk of the town from fish markets to noisy taverns. But for experienced fishermen, that pride was never enough to quench their thirst for conquest. They had heard rumors of a remote area at the end of the ocean, where the water was deep and cold, the waves were fierce, and where rare sharks, larger than anything known to man, lurked. Legend had it that there were ancient great white sharks, more than 20 meters long, as big as small boats, hiding in the darkness of the deep sea, only surfacing when the scent of blood permeated the water. Those stories were half true, half false, but for them, it was a fire that ignited their spirit of adventure that never went out. And so a new journey began. The ship was reinforced, equipped with special steel wires. Iron hooks as big as an arm, and a more modern refrigeration system to preserve the spoils if successful. The day of departure, the sky was full of grey clouds. Strong winds signaled a difficult journey. The ship left the dock with the eyes of those who stayed behind looking worried and hopeful. The further they went, the more brutal the sea became. The waves were as high as walls, constantly crashing in, the small ship rising and falling in the raging sea. The crew had to take turns keeping watch. Sweat and sea salt mixed into a dry white layer of salt on their skin. At night, the sky was pitch black. The white-capped waves flashed in the lightning, creating a scene that was both majestic and terrifying. They knew that the deeper they went into this sea, the greater the danger, but it also meant the closer they were to encountering sea monsters. Then one early morning, before the sun had fully risen, the sea was unusually calm. Not a single seabird, not a single school of fish. The atmosphere was heavy as if it were a sign of bad omen. Suddenly, the giant steel wire shook violently. The winch roared as if it was about to burst, and the ship tilted sharply to one side. All the fishermen rushed forward, their eyes wide open, their hearts pounding. The thing that had caught the hook this time was unlike any shark before. Because the power from the deep sea seemed beyond imagination, the ship was pulled away rapidly. The water sprayed white, the sound of metal clashing, the howling wind mixed with the shouts of the sailors. They knew that this time, they were facing a monster they had never seen before in their lives. Perhaps it was a legend that had risen from the depths of the ocean. The normally calm sea suddenly exploded as if a storm had risen from the depths. Giant waves crashed against the ship's side, foam flying white. The steel wire stretched so tight that it made a terrifying screeching sound, as if it would break in just a moment. Then suddenly, the entire crew was stunned when from under the deep blue water, a giant black shadow gradually appeared. At first it was a blurry trace, but when it emerged, the entire sea shook. It was an incredibly giant shark, its body as long as a ship, its grey-white skin covered with scars as evidence of hundreds of life and death battles. Its eyes were deep and cold, like two soulless black holes, making anyone who looked at it feel a shiver. Its teeth were exposed as it opened its mouth and wagged its tail. Hundreds of sharp teeth as big as knives flashing in the dawn light. Enough to crush everything in an instant. The ship suddenly became strangely small and fragile. Like a toy before the terrible power of the sea monster, it leaped out of the water, its entire body soaring high and then falling, creating a giant wave that engulfed the entire deck. The seawater and white foam obscured the view. Screams resounded. Several sailors were thrown off. Luckily they managed to grab the ropes so they wouldn't be swept away. The shark hissed with a deep roar. Unlike any other fish, the sound echoed as if it came from prehistoric times. It jerked violently, stretching each wire, causing the winch to smoke and groan. The fishermen rushed forward, each holding on tightly, the veins standing out on their arms, their hands bleeding, but no one let go. They understood that this time it was not just a hunt, but also a life and death battle to preserve their lives and honor. The sea became a terrifying arena, where humans and monsters collided with all their might. The wind howled, the waves roared, iron and steel clanged, sweat mixed with blood flowed, but in their eyes burned an unyielding fire. Before them, the legendary shark continued to thrash about as if it wanted to swallow the whole world. The battle lasted for so long that it seemed like it would never end. The legendary shark struggled violently, its tail lashing, causing the sea to become stormy, and towering waves continuously washed over the deck. The steel rope was so tight that sparks flew. The winch groaned. And smoke billowed, as if it was about to burst under such tremendous force. Some of the crew held the rope, others held iron poles and stabbed the monster's body. The sound of metal colliding with the thick steel skin made an ear-piercing sound. But it only seemed to make it crazier. In the midst of the chaos, a young sailor slipped and was thrown out onto the deck by the waves. In an instant, the giant shark rushed forward, its white teeth opened, swallowing the poor man whole before the horrified eyes of his teammates. Screams rang out, everyone was stunned, but fear quickly turned into rage. There was no way back. Everyone gathered their strength, determined to defeat this monster to get revenge and save their lives. The captain ordered the giant iron hooks to be lowered. Each man threw them deep into the shark's body, the chain tightly connected to the ship's side. The monster screamed fiercely, its giant body thrashed as if it wanted to sink the entire ship. But the iron hooks were like human claws. Forcing it into an inescapable battle. Hours passed. Red blood spread into the sea, attracting schools of small fish and other predators to circle around. The space seemed to turn into hell, both terrifying and tragic. Finally, when the shark was exhausted, breathing heavily, its cold eyes gradually fading, the crew delivered the final blow. A long iron spear was lowered, piercing straight through the giant head. The monster roared one last time. Its body thrashed violently and then became still. The whole sea surface was in turmoil before it gradually fainted, surrendering to its fate. The entire crew collapsed on the deck, each person covered in sweat, blood and seawater, but their eyes burned with fierce pride. They knew they had just accomplished an unprecedented feat, defeating a legendary monster of the ocean. But that joy was not complete, because the price they had to pay was the lives of their comrades who had been forever buried in the depths of the sea. The sky was dyed red by the sunset. The small ship carrying the giant body of the monster, along with pain and pride, slowly headed towards the mainland, leaving behind a sea stained with blood and ripples that would never fade. The ship slowly entered the harbor in the misty morning, the rudder heavy as if it were carrying a part of the ocean. When the giant body of the legendary shark appeared, the news immediately spread like a storm. Fishermen, traders, women, children from all the coastal villages flocked to, crowded the harbor. Everyone was silent, their eyes wide open in disbelief at the sight before them. A giant monster, several times longer than the ship, its gray-white skin covered with scars, its jaws revealing long, sharp teeth like blades, which had once caused so much terror in the depths, now lay helpless. Some people were terrified and retreated, some covered their mouths in shock, while the children were both trembling and curious, hiding behind their parents but still trying to keep their eyes on the scene. The buzz of discussion rose throughout the port.